A royal aide stumbles upon a long-forgotten voice memo buried deep within Prince Harry's encrypted archives. What begins as a casual cleanup in a California guesthouse quickly spirals into chaos as the file is played, revealing a private, emotionally raw message to Prince William that was never meant to be heard by anyone else. But someone did hear it, and the fallout reached Buckingham Palace. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What was supposed to be routine and ordinary digital sweep meant to clear outdated files suddenly became the kind of moment royal insiders fear most. A former Sussex staffer, tasked with transferring encrypted data to a new secure system, reportedly noticed an audio file buried beneath layers of outdated folders, its name unassuming, almost deliberately forgettable. But when the file was opened, the voice that filled the room was unmistakable. It was Harry. Not the polished voice heard in interviews, not the controlled tone of documentaries. This was something else, raw, unfiltered, heavy with emotion that sounded unresolved, even years later. The timestamp alone sent a chill through those who saw it. The recording dated back to the very week Harry and Meghan stepped away from royal duties, the week the world watched the monarchy fracture in real time. At first, the message unfolded like a fragile bridge being built. Harry spoke softly, almost carefully, addressing William not as an heir, not as a future king, but as the brother who once shared secrets late at night, who once shielded him from the weight of their surname. His words carried the unmistakable ache of someone reaching backward, searching for a version of family that felt safe. The tone suggested reconciliation, regret, a longing to be understood before it was too late. But then, halfway through, the atmosphere shifted. The warmth in his voice reportedly hardened. The pauses grew longer, and the words began to cut deeper, subtle at first, then unmistakable. References to meetings he was never invited to, decisions made without him, promises he believed were broken, and threaded through it all, like a shadow moving behind the walls, were implications that pointed directly toward Charles. Those who heard the file say it was not an attack, it was worse. It was disappointment sharpened into accusation. Harry allegedly spoke of moments that changed everything, of conversations that never should have happened, and of a realization that his father's loyalty to the institution had quietly eclipsed any loyalty to him. The recording did not rage, it confessed, and that made it far more dangerous. Because confessions don't just wound reputations, they reshape narratives. Somehow, before the recording ever reached William, whispers of its existence travelled faster than the file itself. Palace-connected intermediaries allegedly became aware of the message. Fragments of its content circulated quietly among senior insiders, and within days King Charles was briefed, not by his sons, not through official channels, but through a hushed report that a private recording one created at the most volatile moment in recent royal history had resurfaced, and that it did not paint him kindly. Those close to the palace describe a visible shift almost immediately. Meetings rearranged, advisors summoned, a sudden urgency pulsing through offices that are trained to move slowly. Because this was not just an old message, it was a voice from the moment everything broke. And now, years later, that voice was echoing again, threatening to reopen wounds the monarchy had worked desperately to seal. But what exactly did Harry say in that haunting message, and why is Charles so desperate to silence it before the truth reaches William? Imagine a voice trembling with emotion, caught between heartbreak and hope. That's exactly what William would have heard if he had played the message when it was first sent. Harry's words weren't just a plea, they were a reckoning. The recording didn't begin with accusations or fury. It began with memories quiet, aching recollections of a shared childhood that once felt untouched by duty and deception. Harry spoke of late-night laughter at Balmoral, of their mother's arms around them both, of secret signals exchanged across royal ceremonies when the weight of the crown felt too much. But beneath the warmth was a clear message. Something sacred between them had been broken. As the audio continued, Harry's voice cracked not from anger, but from grief. He described feeling abandoned during the days leading up to Megxit, how every door he knocked on was either slammed shut or led nowhere. He confessed that he waited, in silence, for William to defend him, to stand beside him not in front of cameras, but in private. That silence, he said, spoke louder than any headline. Then the message shifted slowly, almost imperceptibly. What began as confession bled into confrontation. Harry admitted his growing fear that Charles had never truly seen him for who he was, only for the role he was meant to fill. He voiced his suspicion that even before the final crisis, decisions were made to push him and Meghan to the fringe. The deeper he dove into the palace's machinery, the more certain he became that they were never meant to belong. And then came the question that still lingers in the air like smoke. Did you really believe Meghan was a threat to the crown? Or were you just afraid to say otherwise? That single line, softly spoken, almost whispered, cut through the rest. It was less an accusation than a dare. A challenge not to the monarchy, but to William as a brother. And what followed was even more damning. Harry revealed that he had learned of specific meetings between Charles and key advisors that discussed contingency planning in case Harry went public. These discussions happened before he and Meghan ever announced their departure. In one breath, Harry named his father not as king, but as architect. The architect of silence, of distance, of everything that followed. But it was the final few seconds of the message that drew audible gasps from those who heard it. Harry warned that if the cycle continued, he would no longer stay quiet. I've kept what I know locked away, but I won't protect anyone if this goes further. The implication was chilling, that there were secrets still untold, stories still buried beneath royal rugs, and Harry had them all. And yet, as powerful as the recording was, what Harry never anticipated, what he never could have imagined, was that it wouldn't be William who betrayed him. Because while Harry poured out his soul, little did he know the real betrayal was brewing not in Windsor, but within his own circle. What if the one person you trusted the most turned out to be the reason your darkest confessions were exposed? For Prince Harry, that betrayal may have come from someone closer than he ever imagined. The voice memo that Harry had poured his heart into was never meant to travel far, sent through an encrypted channel with layers of security that only a few hand-picked individuals could bypass. He believed he had taken every possible precaution. The intention was simple: reach William privately, bypass the noise and speak brother to brother, soul to soul. But within 48 hours of its dispatch, the recording had slipped from that narrow circle and into the hands of those who had the most to gain from its exposure. It wasn't intercepted by accident, it was accessed with precision. The timeline made it impossible to ignore, and suspicion quickly turned inward. There were only a handful of individuals with the clearance, the passwords, and the proximity. At the top of that list stood a senior Archewell aide, someone Harry had brought in himself. A former media strategist with an impressive resume and an even more polished public presence, this aide had become a gatekeeper for Harry and Meghan's internal communications. But it wasn't the resume that raised alarm bells. It was the connection. Reports began to surface that this trusted team member had once worked closely with a former palace communications officer, someone still believed to have deep, unofficial ties to Charles's advisory circle. What began as coincidence started to look like strategy. As whispers turned to confirmations, the theory darkened. The leak wasn't a slip-up. It was a deliberate act, a preemptive strike to control the narrative, protect Charles from the backlash of his son's revelations, and neutralize a threat before it spiraled into a crisis. Those within the palace who heard portions of the recording knew the danger it posed not just to Charles's image, but to the very foundation of the crown's moral authority. If the public ever heard Harry suggest that Charles knowingly isolated his son to protect the institution, the consequences could fracture royal loyalty in ways unseen since the Diana era. So, someone had acted, someone within Harry's own circle. The fallout was instant and volcanic. Meghan, already wary of the people surrounding them, was reportedly livid, not just at the betrayal but at the failure to detect it before damage was done. Trust, already a fragile currency in their post-royal world, evaporated overnight. Staff were questioned, contracts reviewed. But the truth was clear: there would be no undoing what had already slipped into royal hands. And at the centre of it all stood Harry, humiliated, furious, and once again, alone. The brother he reached for hadn't responded. The message had been intercepted, and someone he trusted had cracked open the most vulnerable part of him for the very people he tried to escape. In Montecito, the silence became heavy. The breach wasn't just digital, it was emotional, a reminder that even far from the palace walls, the game of influence, loyalty, and control still hunted them. Harry had spoken his truth into a message meant for reconciliation, but what he received instead was exposure, sabotage, and an all-too-familiar feeling of abandonment. As the palace scrambled to contain the leak, King Charles made a move no one expected, one that shattered what little peace remained. Witnesses say the walls of Clarence House shook. Not since Diana's tapes had a monarch lost control like this. Charles's fury wasn't just about the message, it was about what it meant for the monarchy's survival. The moment Charles was briefed on the contents of Harry's lost recording, everything changed. The calm veneer he'd maintained in public evaporated behind palace doors. What had been considered a family wound was now a potential threat to the crown itself. According to insiders, Charles erupted in a closed-door crisis meeting with his most trusted aides, demanding immediate containment. Names were shouted, files were pulled, and in an explosive tirade, the king reportedly turned his anger towards someone he rarely confronted, his eldest son. Charles accused William of waiting too long to bring Harry back into the fold, claiming his inaction allowed this chaos to spiral. It wasn't a reprimand, it was a public dressing down, fueled by fear, shame, and fury. In the hours that followed, orders were issued with unprecedented speed. The royal archives, long seen as the sealed vault of royal communications, were suddenly reopened under the king's direction. Charles wanted every trace of Sussex correspondence combed through, evaluated, and flagged. Emails, calls, internal memos, anything that hinted at what else Harry might have kept. What was once considered ancient history was now a ticking time bomb. Charles didn't just fear the damage the leaked message had done, he feared what might come next. That fear manifested in strategic panic. Behind closed doors, palace advisors debated whether the message could resurface publicly. If it did, the world wouldn't just hear Harry's heartbreak, they'd hear damning suggestions that the monarchy orchestrated its own son's isolation. Worse, they'd hear echoes of Diana's voice all over again, another royal driven to the edge, another plea for humanity buried under protocol. Charles, aware of how fragile his image remained, reportedly lashed out at his inner circle, accusing them of underestimating Harry's reach. And while much of the anger was directed outward, the most stunning moment came when Charles allegedly threatened to exclude William from key succession briefings. "If he won't act like the future of the monarchy, he won't be treated like it," he reportedly snapped. The relationship between father and sons, already strained by years of mistrust, now teetered on the edge of collapse. William, caught between duty and disbelief, said little in the meeting, but the tension was unmistakable. What had begun as a brother's cry for reconciliation had morphed into a battle of survival for the monarchy's core. In Charles's eyes, the stakes were no longer personal. They were institutional, legacy, power, control. And if he had to isolate both sons to protect the throne, he would. But behind the king's rage was a secret fear, because the recording wasn't the only thing Harry had stored away. If one recording could shake the monarchy, what could an entire archive do? Tucked away in a secure digital vault are files only Harry could access, and now the palace is in a quiet panic to find out what's inside. What began as a single audio file has turned into a full-scale security crisis, as digital forensics combed through metadata linked to Harry's original recording and unearthed a trail far more alarming. Buried behind layers of encryption and locked away in a private server Harry reportedly maintains outside of official Archewell channels, lies a collection of unreleased audio files, each time-stamped, catalogued, and hidden from even his closest staff. The files aren't just messages, they appear to be a series of recorded reflections, raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. Sources claim many were created during Harry's intensive therapy sessions following the trauma of his mother's death, and the media war that followed. But it's not just therapy, it's research. Grief, when mixed with purpose, becomes a weapon, and Harry had been quietly compiling a digital record of everything the palace thought had been buried. The existence of these files alone has shattered the illusion that the leak was an isolated incident. One source described the archive as a digital diary meets time bomb, with entries spanning nearly a decade. Some files reportedly include direct references to high-level meetings, private exchanges between Charles and Camilla, and even discussions between royal advisors during Meghan's pregnancy. 3 recordings allegedly include Meghan's voice moments of vulnerability, concern, and in one, veiled warnings. The palace, already reeling from the initial leak, now finds itself bracing for something exponentially more dangerous. A trove of truths that were never supposed to see the light of day. The panic is spreading silently. No press briefings, no internal memos, just whispered directives and midnight meetings. It's said that top royal IT consultants have been discreetly replaced. External cybersecurity experts have been brought in under fake corporate aliases. The mission? Breach the vault without triggering detection. Because even now, no one is certain who else knows the full extent of what Harry has documented. What they do know is this one wrong file, one wrong voice clip, and the entire narrative Charles has spent decades restoring could collapse overnight. And at the center of the storm lies a singular fear. One of the files is rumored to contain a private conversation between Charles and Camilla, one that reportedly took place before Harry and Meghan's exit, where plans were allegedly discussed to reduce visibility of the Sussexes for the sake of the monarchy's stability. If that file exists and if it's released, the fallout would be nuclear. Charles wouldn't just face scandal, he'd face accusations of calculated exclusion, betrayal, and monarchy-first manipulation that no PR strategy could fix. But for now, the contents remain sealed. The palace is clawing at shadows, terrified of what might come next. Every step they take is laced with fear, not of what Harry might still say, but of what he's already said, and is waiting for the world to hear. While the palace moves in the shadows, William is left at a crossroads, and what he chooses next could decide the future of the crown. For the first time, William isn't just the heir, he's the gatekeeper of a crumbling legacy. Does he protect the crown, or answer his brother's cry for redemption? His silence could heal or destroy. When the encrypted file finally reached William through a confidential source days after it had already made its way through the royal machinery, he didn't open it. Not immediately. He stared at it, watched the message icon blink on a secure device tucked away in his private office, and walked away. Again, and again. For over a week, he let it sit, untouched. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew that once he heard Harry's voice, once he truly understood what was said, there would be no going back. Not to the life he had carved within the royal machine, not to the silence he had told himself was strength. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was about identity, legacy, and the reckoning of choices made under the weight of a crown. Inside those palace walls, opinions fractured fast. Catherine, ever the composed strategist, urged caution. Her voice calm but firm. Once it's opened, it can't be unheard, she warned. She feared the emotional spiral, the potential manipulation, the reopening of wounds Harry and Meghan had already sliced deep. But not everyone agreed. Princess Anne, never one to sugarcoat hard truths, allegedly told William in private that transparency might be the only way forward. He's still your brother, she said. And one day, when your children ask what you did, what will you say? Behind the scenes, advisors scrambled, half-whispered about containment, the need to stop the message from becoming a media storm. The other half saw a chance to reset the narrative, to show compassion without surrendering control. But while the palace debated, William sat alone, torn between two truths, one etched in duty, the other carved from memory. The flashbacks came uninvited. Harry's laughter in the halls, Diana's hand between theirs during long car rides, and then everything that came after, the staged appearances, the hollow smiles, the distance that turned into silence, the silence that turned into exile. According to one source, there was a moment late at night where William hovered over the message, thumb poised above the delete button. It would have been easy. No headlines, no consequences, no pain. But something stopped him. And when he finally pressed play, What he heard wasn't defiance, it was desperation. The voice wasn't the voice of a rebel, it was the voice of a brother, fractured, lost, pleading. Harry's words spilled out with sorrow more than anger. But it was the final sentence, the one William would reportedly replay again and again, that shattered his composure. "You're all I have left." And just like that, the weight shifted. The decisions no longer belonged to courtiers or strategists. It was his to make. Does he stay silent to protect the crown from scandal, or does he speak to acknowledge the pain, the history, and the brother who still waited in the dark? A war waged within him, a prince caught between two futures. And while William stood at that emotional crossroads, just as William prepares to make his choice, the media gets wind of the storm brewing, and the public won't stay silent. Leaks, headlines, speculation. The world erupts as rumours swirl of a secret message, meant for William, and King Charles's furious attempts to erase it from existence only make it louder. Within hours of the first whispers, the media pounced like wolves. Tabloid front pages exploded with sensational teasers: Harry's final plea to William, and Crown secrets exposed is the monarchy cracking. The timing wasn't lost on anyone. The silence from Buckingham Palace, paired with strategic dodging from royal spokespeople, only intensified public suspicion. The question wasn't whether the recording existed, it was what was in it that made the palace so desperate to make it disappear. And in today's world, silence doesn't kill a story, it feeds it. The firestorms spread across continents. In the United States, networks framed Harry as a son pushed too far, a man trying to reach the brother he lost to royal tradition. But across the UK, the narrative was more complex and far more brutal. British outlets, long loyal to the Crown's image, cast Harry as reckless, disloyal, even dangerous. Social media became a battlefield. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Team Harry trended globally, matched by a tidal wave of hashtag loyal to the Crown loyalists defending Will. I am silence. The online war mirrored the real one unfolding behind palace walls, but perhaps the most damning comparisons came from veteran royal commentators who drew chilling parallels between this scandal and Diana's infamous Panorama interview. "It's déjà vu," one wrote. A Windsor son speaking truth in secret, shaking the monarchy from the outside. The comparison sent shivers through the monarchy. If history was repeating itself, it was doing so with the fury of a storm. Meanwhile, the pressure mounted on William. Every public appearance became a minefield of speculation. Was he going to respond? Would he deny the message existed, or worse, confirm it? The palace scrambled to maintain control, but the leaks didn't stop. In fact, they multiplied. Someone close to the royal circle, unidentified but undeniably informed, began feeding breadcrumbs to the press. Little details. The final words in Harry's recording, the alleged threats to reveal more, the suggestion that Charles himself had been caught on tape in unguarded moments. Every leak hit harder than the last, each one narrowing the gap between rumour and revelation. The monarchy was no longer fighting whispers, it was drowning in them. And with every passing hour, the public's appetite grew more ferocious. But even as the media feasts on the royal drama, the most devastating twist is yet to come, because Charles has a plan of his own. Kings don't forgive, they outmaneuver. While William wrestles with heartbreak and Harry hides behind digital walls, Charles quietly initiates a bold counterstrike that could end the Sussex threat once and for all. Amid the media frenzy and internal panic, Charles retreats into strategy, not silence. In private meetings guarded with the utmost secrecy, he begins assembling a legal war room. The first move? Target the pillars holding up Harry's remaining royal privileges. Advisors are instructed to review the fine print on Harry's security arrangements and inheritance protections clauses embedded long before Megxit, but now vulnerable under the weight of Harry's rebellion. According to one source, Charles is heard saying, "If he chooses to act like an outsider, then we treat him like one." It's a chilling declaration from a monarch whose patience has worn dangerously thin, but Charles doesn't stop at legalities. The palace media machine shifts gears with startling efficiency. Briefings begin to circulate among select journalists off the record, but unmistakable in intent. The story taking shape is sharp and subtle. Harry is not a villain, he's unwell. The implication is that his actions stem not from pain or betrayal, but from instability. the hope to reframe the entire crisis not as a royal failure, but as a personal tragedy. Carefully placed narratives begin to seep into headlines, questioning Harry's state of mind, his decision-making, even his grip on reality. It's an old tactic, one used before and now revived with quiet venom. Simultaneously, a mysterious document surfaces, an unsigned, sealed agreement dating back to a private family negotiation just after Harry and Meghan's wedding. The document, previously believed to be ceremonial, allegedly guaranteed certain non-financial privileges in exchange for silence on sensitive matters. Now it's being reinterpreted as legally void, opening the door for the palace to sever more than just ties. Influence and networks are activated. Meghan's Hollywood partnerships, some still in development, face unexpected delays. Emails go unanswered, meetings cancelled. It's not loud sabotage, it's methodical suffocation, silent, untraceable, and suffused with plausible deniability. And in the shadows of it all, Camilla emerges not just as consort, but as confidant and consigliere. Reports suggest she's urging Charles to end this chapter swiftly and permanently. They've made their choice, she's rumoured to have said. So must we. Her fingerprints are subtle, but the shift in tone is unmistakable. The Crown, once pleading for peace, is now preparing for purge. Yet not everyone in the royal circle agrees. Edward and Anne are said to be blindsided by the sudden aggression. Quiet voices in the family express concern not about the scandal but about the cost of retaliation. There's a growing unease that Charles, in his quest to protect the throne, might destroy the very unity it stands upon. But before Charles can execute his final move, an unexpected voice enters the chaos, and it changes everything. Just when the monarchy thought it could control the narrative, a long-forgotten video diary of Princess Diana is leaked to an independent journalist, and in it, she speaks directly about her son's future, Charles's legacy, and a prophecy too haunting to ignore. It arrived without warning, sent anonymously to a small but credible journalist known for refusing royal bribes. The footage, grainy but unmistakably real, revealed a side of Diana that even the most seasoned royal watchers weren't prepared for. She wasn't speaking to the public, not performing for the press. She was speaking to the future recording a message for the day when, as she put it, they'll try to rewrite what really happened. What she said in that diary did more than reignite old emotions, it cracked open the foundations of a carefully protected royal script. Diana predicted the fracture. She feared it. And now she was speaking from beyond the veil to remind the world that her sons were never meant to become enemies. In the recording, Diana expresses something painfully prescient. She speaks of her deep love for William, her pride in his calm, his sense of duty. But then, with a flicker of dread, she wonders aloud whether the institution will turn him into what it needs, not what he is. And then she shifts her voice softer, but more urgent as she describes Harry. The child with the wild heart, the protector's soul. She feared he'd be the one pushed out to preserve the image, used as a distraction, then quietly erased when his voice became inconvenient. Word for word, her warnings mirror the very message Harry had sent to William. But what chilled viewers even more was Diana's recollection of a private conversation with Charles. She claimed he once told her that only one son can carry the crown. The other must learn to serve it or be forgotten by it. That line sent shockwaves through the media, as it validated every fear, every accusation, every confession Harry had kept hidden for years. The leaks spread like fire. News outlets across the globe ran the clip. Hashtags turned into headlines, and the sympathy that Harry and Meghan had long been denied now surged with renewed force. For the first time in years, the public looked past the interviews, the Netflix specials, the tabloid wars, and saw a grieving son echoing his mother's plea for protection, for acknowledgement, for truth. William, upon seeing the video, reportedly broke down. Advisors say he left a meeting abruptly, made no statement, and went dark for hours. But what followed next stunned even those closest to him. He picked up the phone and called Harry. The content of their conversation remains unknown, but reports confirm that a private jet departed under a pseudonym. A security team was rerouted, and a location completely untraceable was secured for a face-to-face meeting. For the first time in years, the brothers would speak without cameras, without aides, Without history standing in the way, no one knows what was said. But something shifted. And maybe, just maybe, it was Diana's voice echoing across decades that forced the crown's heirs to finally listen to each other again. As the monarchy braces for aftershocks, one thing is clear truth, once whispered behind palace walls, now echoes louder than the crown itself. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.